Hello and welcome back to Film on High Reviews. Today we're going to be discussing the 1970 film El Topo, written, directed, and starring Alejandro Jodorowsky. The film tells the story of a mysterious black-clad gunslinger named El Topo and his journey to become the greatest of all gunslingers by challenging four masters, only to have his worldview and beliefs challenged as he becomes something of a messiah for a group of deformed people who live in an underground tunnel beneath a city full of degenerate, rich, monstrous people. So, what did you think of El Topo?
I really like this movie, but it's as the movie went on, I felt I wasn't high enough to watch this film.
Wow, well that's a fucking sterling endorsement.
It's just that with this film, there's so many things that only in the 70s could you get away with some of the things that they do or some of the things that they portray.
Yes.
And the story, weirdly enough, is simple enough to understand that once you get to the end, you understand the punchline and you're like, oh, okay.
The story is seemingly simple on the surface, sibilance, but it's kind of packed with allegory and meaning.
Oh, yeah.
And, a lot of... Because the thing with Jodorowsky, like, he's kind of a legendary filmmaker at this point. He started out doing, like, mime and theater and things like that, and then sort of built his way up to making films.
Mm-hmm.
He made a movie called Fondo Elise, which was not very well received. I think it was banned in Mexico, and there were, like, riots over it. So, kind of a prosperous start right there. But then he got around to doing this film, El Topo, which is kind of a takeoff on a lot of like spaghetti westerns and western ideas that were going on at the time, but recontextualized through Jodorowsky's particular view of surrealism and religion and these really crazy ideas. The film, even though it wasn't like a huge financial hit, it became kind of a sensation in its own right for being one of the first kind of cult midnight movies to attract a sizable audience. A lot of people became fans of the film. Most notably, John Lennon. He was really a big fan of the film and even funded some of Jodorowsky's later projects, and also Marilyn Manson, a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, David Lynch, Nicholas Winding Refn. And it's kind of easy to see why, because this is a film that, like, really, regardless how you feel about it quality-wise, it's the kind of film that presents you with imagery and ideas that you're not going to really see anywhere else. They are distinctly Jodorowsky-ian or ish, if you will.
Yeah, for my first experience into his madness, I see the blueprints of it all in a lot of movies that try to take on that type of idea of surrealism.
Yeah.
And I really like this type of take because, yes, the religious implications are kind of distorted in a sense. They're kind of there, but they're poignant,
there's a lot going on. There's like some obvious like Christianity, but also a lot of Buddhism, like a lot of kind of Buddhist ideas, especially towards the later half of the film, as El Topo, the main character, shaves his head and takes on the kind of attire of a Buddhist monk and becomes more of a pacifist in the way he... So there's like a spiritual trance, but there's so much going on in this film, like... So we have the beginning here where we have this El Topo, this gunslinger, who looks kind of like the stereotypical badass gunslinger. Long dark hair, beard, black hat, coat. And he's traveling the desert with his young son, who's 7 years old, and his son appears completely nude throughout the film, which is also kind of an interesting idea, which I guess was to, like a symbol of innocence or something like that, purity within the desert, like the childhood innocence. And the film gets violent and dark from that point on as El Topo is confronted, and he goes on this spiritual journey of violence, essentially. And he abandons his son even in favor of a woman. Like when he kills the evil colonel who was massacring the people, he leaves his son behind with the Franciscan monks and instead takes the colonel's woman with him. And she's the one who kind of leads him down this path where she's really pressuring him to take on these other gunslingers and become the greatest of all gunslingers. And that's where his kind of path gets sullied, you could say, because he starts cheating and using trickery to overcome these masters, who are all kind of like, the masters sort of represent like Buddhist icons in and of themselves. They're gunslingers who have almost like transcended their previous selves. They've meditated so much that a lot of them, like, they don't even need to really use the gun anymore. Like, they've overcome it. And El Topo, being the kind of brutish, violent, he just uses trickery to overcome them instead of meditating on their lessons and what they're trying to teach him. So that kind of leads him to his failing, if you will. He eventually gets betrayed by the woman and another woman, really this mysterious black-clad woman who almost seems like a female version of El Topo himself. Like, I don't know if Jodorowsky was trying to make some commentary on, like, the psyche, the male and the female, some Freudian shit, I don't know. But yeah, he has his failing and he's left to die in the desert, and then he's rescued by these kind of deformed outcast people. And he becomes a god to them as he sits there meditating. But then when he's reborn and he wakes up about 20 years later, he's ready to become a man again. He doesn't see himself as a god anymore, and he's renounced his violent ways. So he's had his transformation, but then we see him heading back into this different kind of world. Like, in many ways, the film can be kind of split into two halves. The first half is the more spiritual journey that El Topo is on, but then the second half becomes more political and more social, as we're dealing with this kind of class struggle between these underground outcasts and the people on top, who are kind of the most grotesque versions of like capitalism and violence, and they practice slavery and just really the most like disgusting elements of Western civilization that have been amplified to like a maximum. And yeah, like El Topo now, as this changed man, He falls in love with a young dwarf woman who was attending to him while he was in his meditative state. And he forms a plan to escape from the tunnel and lead the outcasts to freedom. But that poses some difficulties. And also he encounters his son, who he previously abandoned again. And his son, who was a priest, but also kind of has his own agenda, and he wants his own revenge. So it leads to a pretty like interesting conclusion. And it's all very spiritual and very out there. And it's really kind of a movie that presents you with all of these really loaded ideas and forces you to really think about it. And yeah, like, on one hand, you could look at this film as it's a druggy movie, or it's like, a weirdo, like, trying to be weird for the sake of being weird and just, like, making, like, a procession of freakish incidents, but I don't really think that's the point. I do think Jodorowsky was trying to tell a particular kind of story here.
Oh no, that's what I mean by the story is simple to me.
Yeah.
Is that it's the story, the archetype of this hero or this guy who wants to be the best, but
exactly.
In order to be the best, he has to kind of do some underhanded shit. But as soon as he gets it, then he has his greatest fall.
Yeah, it's revealed to just be a falsehood, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then so he finds his religion. But what's interesting that I really liked about the film, that I get it, is that at the very end, all, like, they've been building up to finally getting to the end of the tunnel to get the great escape. But as soon as the escape is there, all the deformed people who are basically slaves just decide, fuck it, we have had enough, and they go to try to take on the rich people.
I don't think they were going to take them on. I just think they were going there to, like, help us, give us something kind of thing.
Like, either a protest or something, but they just marched on in the face of death, and then...
Well, the idea was that they were being kept there, like, basically out of their will. Like, the idea is it was too... Since most of them were disabled or, had problems, they weren't capable of reaching the top and actually escaping, and that's why El Topo, who is, a physically able man, he's capable of doing these things and excavating the tunnel. But since they were kept under there against their will for so long, once they're presented with the opportunity for escape, they just come running out. And when El Topo breaks through the tunnel, he even says, "Don't say it right now, it's too early." Like, I think his plan was to just gradually disseminate it and bring people out slowly, but then once they realized they were free, they just all came running out. And I think that's a natural reaction. Like, when people feel trapped, they just come running out as soon as they see a method of escape. But again, the real threat was actually waiting for them down in this town. And they even say that at one point when, like, El Topo and the dwarf woman that he loves, they go into the town and they perform, like, little magic shows and mime shows and tricks, essentially to earn money to get dynamite to excavate the tunnel. And even they see the kind of savagery and the brutality that's going on, and they're like, is it even worth coming out here? Like, you know, it's worse out here. But El Topo has kind of become single-minded, like he's almost taken it upon himself. But yeah, it has like a drastic consequence, and it's like...
Exactly, and then essentially everybody unfortunately dies, and El Topo is just there, just, you know, mourning all of their deaths. And so one of the most badass things happens where pretty much all the rich people basically gang up on him and start shooting him. But the guy from Mystical Powers or some shit like that is just withstanding it all, and then just picks up a shotgun or a rifle, and then mows down the entire town.
Yeah, he gets his revenge.
You know?
And then, yeah, like, I think the point of the film was, yeah, like, he has his journey from a man of violence and into a man of peace. But then ultimately he's forced to become a man of violence again in the end, just by the natural ugliness and inequality of the world. And again, maybe that's why I say the second half is more political, because you have to keep in mind things that were going on in the world. The 60s and 70s were a very politicized time. Racism and all of these kind of issues that were really coming to the forefront. So, like, yeah, just his idealism is crushed by just the reality of the world, and he's driven back to violence, but this time in a kind of more righteous way, to avenge the death of the oppressed as opposed just for his own glory. And yeah, like, it's kind of it's an interesting denouement, and yeah, at the end El Topo becomes superhuman as he's fighting off all of these people. He's like taking all of these gunshots and not dying. And that's essentially because he has finally become one of those gun masters that he was striving to become earlier in the film. He's reached that transcendent point where he's, you know, become almost an avatar of violence. You know, the bullets don't affect him anymore. But in order to become that, he had to kind of shed his own ego. You know, like, it's very kind of hippie-ish idea, like, you know, LSD, ego death, reveal the purity of the self underneath all of that bullshit. So, like, yeah, once he stopped working in service of his own ego, then he was really, truly able to assume that power. But again, by that point, it was almost meaningless, because everything he'd been fighting to preserve and save had been destroyed. So, at the end, he was left with no other option than to kind of kill himself and immolate himself in the style of many Buddhist monks who have done so, again, in protest of the Vietnam War. Again, like, it's a film that is fascinating because... on one hand, it's presenting you with this kind of surreal, bizarre version of the American West of maybe the 1800s or the 1700s. And you have these familiar icons like the gunslinger riding the horse, the cowboy. There's even, like, you know, duels and stuff like that. He's playing around with these familiar ideas. But the film also has a tremendous relevance for the time that it was made. You know, like, Alejandro Jodorowsky was trying to address all of these kind of things, these social things that were going on, but also address kind of biblical ideas, religious ideas, philosophical ideas. Like, that's why the film is almost, it's like a gestalt of all these different things coming together. Like, Jodorowsky had a quote about this film that is kind of pretentious in a way. Like, he said that, like, if you're a limited person, then El Topo will seem like a limited film to you, but if you're a deep person, then El Topo will be, you'll see the depth in the film. So essentially what he's saying is, like, you know, if you think the film is bad, you just don't get it, which is kind of a knee-jerk, pretentious defense that you could argue. But I think there is a point to be made for that, because you have to, you owe it to the film in a way to try to look beyond the superficial and look beyond what's just being presented. Like, people might look at this film, one person might look at this film and think it's just a freak show. Like, you know, it's just a movie that's made to be shocking and weird and freak people out. And other people might look at it and see the deeper meaning that, you know, it's not just him trying to get his kicks or do this kind of grotesquerie. He is using this imagery and these ideas in service of something greater.
And also the fact that when you mentioned this, the political aspect of it all.
Yeah.
when you look at his kid later on, this kid wants revenge and wants to kill his dad, but he says, "You know what? I'll kill you after you finish the tunnel."
Yeah, like he sees his father again, and he wants revenge for his abandonment.
Exactly.
At first, he wants to kill him, but then when he realizes his father is trying to help people, he's like, "Okay, I'll kill you after you've saved these people."
But after what happens with the deaths of, not even with all the deaths, but they reach the final hole, and the dad is just looking at him, just saying, "All right, I'm ready."
Yeah.
You know, and boom, there you go. The son is just like, "You know what? No,
Yeah,
I
he
can't."
doesn't do it. Yeah. Well, again, it's very kind of biblical idea, the father, the son, these kind of things. And in the end, the son kind of becomes the father. He becomes El Topo. He wears the clothes, and he goes off with the dwarf woman and the newborn child. So essentially, like, yeah, he is kind of repeating the journey in a way.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of starting again from where it ended, starting again from where it began. And El Topo, in the end, does become one of those masters. As he immolates himself, his grave, we see that he leaves behind this kind of like honeycomb of bees, which is something we saw earlier in the film on the other masters' graves. So in the end, he did achieve his transcendence. He did ultimately achieve his goal. And yeah, like it's a really revelatory film, and it can be like looked at from different ways and applied from a lot of different ways. And like, it's weird, like watching it now, because I did see it when I was younger, and like I said before, there is almost that appeal of like, you got to see this movie just because it's weird and out there. But like, if you are willing to give it a little bit and try to get on the wavelength of what the film is telling you, like, you might get like a bit more out of it. Like,
yeah, overall my rating for this film would be 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, it's a weird film to give a rating to, because like, we've mostly been talking about like disseminating the things that happen in the film and the ideas. We haven't even really spoken about like the filmmaking of it. Like, It is interesting. Like, Jodorowsky used these really, like, just the way the film is shot, the landscapes and stuff. It is beautiful. The blue skies, the desert, the way it contrasts. There is some pretty nasty violence in the film. Like, we see dead people and pools of blood and guts and stuff like that. But it's kind of also mitigated by this cartoonish almost like feeling to it. Like, again, like, I feel like that's him playing around. And this was really Jodorowsky's like dream project. Like, he really poured himself into this. He directed it, starred in it, wrote it, did the music as well. So it has like that feeling of an auteur, like it's a film that's made directly from like the soul of someone. It's a film that was made, I don't think, with much commercial aspiration. Like, even in the 70s where, because, around that period there was a window where people were making weirder, out there films that were actually getting mainstream attention, like Midnight Cowboy, for example, and movies like that. But yeah, like, I don't think this was a film made with the intention of really like breaking the bank or being a big like, money maker. It was a film meant to like espouse a more personal ethos and give you kind of a psychedelic, spiritual, political kind of journey. And yeah, on the whole, I would give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah. As you said, basically, this is the type of movie where you really have to slowly roll and very much digest exactly what's going on to get really much your own opinion of what you have witnessed. It's a film worth seeing. Like, if you're a cinephile, it's definitely different. It's weird. It's out there. Yeah. It's different than anything you'll see. And, like, if you're a fan of surrealism, if you're a fan of David Lynch and things like that, then this is definitely the kind of film you should check out. It's not going to be a film for everyone, definitely not. But, even if you're a Western fan and you maybe want to see something that plays around with the tropes and does things that are kind of different with it. But yeah, this is a film that I think has justly earned its cult status. Jodorowsky, for all of his madness and all of his eccentricity, he's definitely a man who kind of believes, he's a believer. I don't think he's a charlatan. I don't think he's faking this shit. I think he really is this kind of, out there guy, and he believes in this kind of mystical stuff, and he's trying to present us with a particular vision that you won't see from many other filmmakers. So just on the strength of that, El Topo is a film worth seeing. This has been Film on High.
Peace.
Later.